Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by GrandPad. GrandPad is the all-in-one tablet designed especially for senior adults. With GrandPad, you get safe, simple video calling and photo sharing. Users can create a private family network that allows for secure photo and video sharing. The GrandPad utilizes a simple format that allows seniors to enjoy games, music, email, and more. Visit our special GrandPad website designed exclusively for the Heart of Hospice listeners at grandpad.net/THOH.
My guest today is Rosanne Corcoran. She's the creator and host of Daughterhood the Podcast. Rosanne cared for her mother through a 12-year journey with vascular dementia. She started as a supportive caregiver and then became an in-home sandwich caregiver for her mother's final 6 years. In each podcast that she does monthly, Rosanne interviews experts in the field, discussing everything from dealing with dementia behaviors to siblings and caregiving, end-of-life care, grief, and everything in between. Daughterhood the Podcast also provides listeners with the comfort of knowing they're not facing those caregiving challenges alone. They also furnish strategies and resources to help you cope with caregiving better. Rosanne was most recently named one of Next Avenue and American Society on Aging's 2024 Advocates for Aging. She's going to be sharing the story of being the caregiver for her mom and all the different ways it affected her life. You're going to hear Rosanne talk about her mother's funeral planning and how it sort of came out spontaneously after her uncle's funeral, and how grateful Rosanne was that that planning had been done ahead of time. She's going to offer some tips on providing dignity and how she did that for her mom. One of the biggest things she did was not talking about her mom when she was in the room as if she wasn't there. And you're going to hear how she talks about her advocacy as a caregiver, advocacy with doctors and other healthcare professionals and with family members as well. Rosanne is going to describe the experience that she had with caregiving, especially focusing on sleep deprivation. When Rosanne's mother was unable to sleep, she was unable to sleep. So she's going to be talking about that as well. We're taking a deep dive into caregiving today, talking a lot about dementia. I hope it's a beneficial conversation for you as it was for me. So here's my conversation with Rosanne Corcoran of Daughterhood the Podcast. Rosanne, thanks so much for joining me today. Welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Thank you, Helen. It's my pleasure, really.
I love having other podcasters on the show. There's just something easy about talking to another podcaster.
Yeah, we get it. That's what makes it easy. We get it.
It's
we get
true.
the production. Yep.
It's
Yep.
true. I don't know that the guests that don't podcast, I don't know that they're especially hard to manage, but there's just something easy about podcasters, right? We're special.
I fully agree. We are. We're our own breed, aren't we?
This is true. All right. Well, we're going to start with an icebreaker question, just sort of introduce the topic, and then we're going to get into your story because you got a lot of story.
Okay.
So today's question is from the End of Life deck.
Oh, wow.
The End of Life deck is a small set of cards that end of life workers can use to have conversations about end of life care, end of life wishes. It's by the creators of the Death deck, if you've ever heard the Death deck.
I have, yeah.
Okay, so this one is called Final Arrangements. Who would you like to be in charge of making funeral arrangements for you?
Me.
Yeah. Oh, you want to be in charge of your own? You know what? That's audacious, and I really like that.
Yeah, me.
How would that work? You have to leave all the directions.
Yeah, and I would. That's my thing. I'm that person. So, it would be me. I would spell it all out, and here you go. And it's a twofold thing, okay? It's a twofold answer because one, no one would have to worry about it. I don't want anybody to have to worry about anything. That's my mantra, right? So I would take care of it. And then all they have to do is follow the directions.
I like that.
It wouldn't add stress because you know as well as I do, when somebody passes, it's that, they would like this. Well, would they? You're guessing. Right. And you're guessing sometimes in those moments of grief when you can't think straight about anything. So it alleviates all of the stress. I would want my family not have to worry about, do you think she wanted the eclairs after dinner? Like, you know what I mean? Those kind of, just forget it. Aside from the major decisions, obviously, I'm teasing, but it's one more thing that they don't have to worry about.
Yeah, I like that. It's really a gift to the people that have loved you and will be taking care of you after you die. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I like that. It is.
Okay. Like we're going to jump into your story because you have a big caregiving story. And I want you to share that. So share with my listeners your caregiving story.
Oof. I probably should have asked you this before. Do you want the whole,
Give me like the modified Cliff Notes version, because you really do. You have an extensive caregiving story.
So I am the youngest of four in my family, and by a lot. There's a lot of distance between, it's 16, 14, 8, and then me. So I was my mom's change of life baby. Oh. And my father passed right before my 17th birthday. So it was me and mom. And from that time, it made me feel like I had to protect her. She didn't need protection. She didn't need my protection. She was her own independent woman, and she remained her own independent woman, recreating her life at 56 and going forward from that in her second part of her life. But for me, when my dad died, it was that, oh my goodness, it's me and her. Like we're a set here. And I stayed with her. I lived with her until I got married at 26. So it was the two of us. We lived together. We moved closer to her work. She was a hairdresser. She could walk to work. She didn't need a car. So I would drive her. I would drive her to her doctor's appointments. I would drive her to her friends. I would drive her to see her sisters, my aunts, who I adored. And she met someone, and she started ballroom dancing on the weekends. So she would work, and she'd go out dancing. And in the beginning of the week, I would take her wherever she needed to go. It was great. It was, it was our little unit, right? So as she got older, it was almost like I was behind the curtain because we had that relationship. So I I could tell, we could talk to each other with our eyes across the room. We didn't even have to speak. And that came in handy through all of my caregiving because we already had that established. And she would tell me things that she wouldn't tell my siblings because of that relationship. And like I said, I would take her to her doctors. Her doctors all knew me. It wasn't unusual to go to the doctors with her. So we had that relationship. So when she was around 80, it was right after her 80th birthday, she said, I think my memory's changing. And I was like, oh no. Because she was the second youngest of 12 kids. And all but 3 of them had some sort of dementia. So she knew what it looked like. She knew all of that. And so did I, because we would go visit and I would see my aunts and uncles and all of that. So I was like, okay, well, the positive thing is that she noticed it and she shared it with me. And I thought that would make it easier. It did not make it easier.
What a nice thought.
What, listen, you hope, right? And I would bring it up, we would go to her doctor and I was like, this is great. She acknowledged it. We're going to bring it up to the doctor and the doctor's going to take care of it. Doctor didn't think anything of it because she was vibrant. She was still working. She was still going out. She was still dancing. She was living independently. Nobody was concerned. Not her primary, not her cardiologist. No one was concerned. I was concerned. So I went into what I like to call stealth caregiving because I observed and I kept an eye on things, like her eating, what she was buying at the grocery store or, at the was she buying multiple products, what was happening, how she was doing around her apartment, with the laundry and the bills and taking her meds and all those kind of things that change in dementia that people don't realize because people think it's just a forgetting disease.
Right.
So they just think, oh, I forgot my keys, I must have dementia. No, it's the processing. And when those processes start to change, that's a flag. So, I would see her 3 or 4 times a week. I'd call her every day, multiple times, and that's how we went along for the next 7 years. And through that time, things started to change more. Her dance life partner died. One of her 2 remaining sisters died. She retired from work. Big life things and a lot of grief. And grief affects you in different ways in different parts of your life, as we know, right? But I could start to see the changes in her. And again, I was the only one. I would repeatedly say to her cardiologist, her blood pressure's a little high and I don't know if she's taking her medicine. He's like, oh, it's fine. Those kind of things. And even her primary, when I first brought it up, she said, well, as long as she doesn't get lost when she's driving, she's fine. And I thought, wait, are you kidding me? Right?
That was the standard? That was when you get concerned?
That was the standard, as long as she doesn't get lost when she drives. Now, she doesn't drive.
Wow.
So thanks, Doc. Appreciate that.
Not helpful.
Not helpful. Not helpful. So, in it was 2014, and I would go to her apartment every day. I'd drop my daughter off at school. I'd go to my mom's. I'd let myself in, which was also a change because mom was an early riser, always an early riser. And now she'd become the 10:30 riser. Mm-hmm. And she didn't want to socialize in her apartment. People would gather and, talk, didn't want to do that. I'd spend the morning with her, and then I'd leave in the afternoon and pick up my daughter. And then I'd get home, and I'd call her 4 more times. Did you have dinner? What are you doing? Did you take your pills? All of that, and then, good night, and a good night call. She also had a vasovagal condition where she would pass out if she was warm or if she had pain, like if she got a blood test or a medical test or something like that. And she had vertigo. So she had a couple things that were working against her on top of everything else. And in September, she passed out, and it was probably for the 5th time that year that she had passed out. I went down, I scooped her up, and I brought her to my house, and I never brought her back to her apartment. And it was her ENT that I had taken her to because I thought maybe it's her vertigo. I don't know. I'm getting no help from the doctors. I don't know. I took her to her ENT, and she said she had, when I finally got the report, it said she had evolving dementia. And I thought, that's odd to say it in that way. Like, that's really strange. But what it gave me was the piece of paper that I needed for myself.
Yeah. It's some sort of validation.
It was the validation, so that it wasn't, I'm seeing something that's not there, because my siblings didn't want to see it. Helen didn't want to see it.
I'm hypervigilant. Yeah.
Right. I forget things too. Oh, I get confused with, and it's like, no. This is not that. This is not that. This is something different. And that paper allowed me to kind of exhale a little bit, like, no, you're doing the right thing. And when I finally got her to a neurologist, they said, oh, no, I wouldn't let her live by herself. And I thought, okay, well, that's another mark in the column. So I was fortunate. I had a 3-car attached garage to my house, and I put her bedroom set and her living room set in that space. She had direct access to the hall bath, and that's where she was. And I found a home visit geriatrician office. They would come. With them, I got home blood tests. They even had ultrasounds that could come. They were set up with a home cardiologist office.
Nice.
So all of that really, it was great, because on top of her vasovagal and her vertigo, she also didn't have cartilage between her knees anymore.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was hard to get her around. And even if I got her out, my mother was not using a wheelchair.
Oh,
there was no.
She refused?
There is no way she was getting in a wheelchair.
Oh,
no.
She was a pistol.
No. Oh, yes, she was. Yes, she was. So that was really what made the difference, because people could come. I got a podiatrist to come in. There was even an eye doctor that could come. So I literally had a whole health system in my house.
Yeah.
Which was great.
Talk about home delivery.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. It was not easy, but it worked.
So you were a sandwich caregiver. You were raising kids at the same time you were providing care for your mom.
Yes, ma'am.
And you were at first what I would call a remote caregiver. Means your person lived in another place, and then you became a hands-on caregiver.
Yes. Yep.
So I have to ask you, this relationship that you had with your mom as her caregiver, and the distance that your siblings had from the situation, did this cause discord between you and your siblings?
It was hard. It was hard because I was like, you know what? Okay, then I can't talk to you about this. Like, I'm not gonna expend my energy trying to make you see something that you can't see for whatever reason, right? And it's you're looking at the same person. You're looking. She's all of us. It's our mother, but we're seeing her in different ways, and I can't change the way you see her. And if you can't accept it for your own heart, for your own soul, that's not on me. I can't. There's nothing I can do with that. So it was hard for me because it was frustrating. My frustration was what made it hard. And when I would try to, like, okay, just try to step back and think this through. And it's hard to think it through when it's so emotional. Mm-hmm. But you have to, because otherwise you're just on that loop. You're on the loop. And since my mother's passed, they've all said to me, I'm really sorry. I couldn't see it. I couldn't accept it.
So they realized that you were right. The situation was progressing, and they just couldn't engage in a realistic way. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. There's a different perspective when you're not living inside it.
Yes.
Living inside it. I think a lot of caregiving units, families go through that, because each one of them has a different perspective. The distance may be different, whether you're hands-on, remote from another state, and also it depends on relationships too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, and it didn't help me during that time. After the fact, it's like, okay, well, great. Yay me.
Yeah,
I was right.
right.
Woohoo.
You feel a little validated and respected, but during this situation, good feelings aren't very helpful.
No. And that's
Yeah.
why I always say to people when they say, my siblings don't help. And I'm like, yeah, it's very rare when a sibling unit comes together and cares for a parent. It's really rare. And why I don't know why we think that that's the norm, but it's not.
True.
It's not. I call it an urban legend. It's an urban legend.
Yeah. In 15 years of hospice, seeing siblings quarrel, become disengaged, distanced, completely estranged, that's very common because this caregiving is so hard. So I'm the youngest of three, and I have a 91-year-old mom who has dementia, and she's changed drastically in her mentation in the last 12 months or so. And we just sort of gelled from the very beginning. This is your gift. You take this. And I'm grateful for you doing this. And here's what I know how to do. So I'll bring that part of it. And we communicate, which is a huge thing with my mother's dementia because her answers for various questions, for the same question, vary greatly depending on who she's talking to and what time of day it is. So the communication was a huge thing for us as a group.
It is the most important thing because if you're not communicating on the same page, forget it. Forget it.
I think the dementia actually has made it more difficult too, just because of what the diagnosis is. Because it's funny, I realized a couple of days ago that when we first found out that my mom's memory issues were related to dementia, I dropped the garage door down on my car twice within a week. And I had trouble sleeping. I was emotional and very tearful about my mother. And I think it's because if she were to die after living with dementia for several years, I know what that looks like.
Right.
I know what that looks like. And so I'm grieving that.
But it's interesting because you see what it was. You've seen what it was that made you feel that way. Like you've been able to identify it. Like this is what's happening. This is why I'm feeling this way. And that's huge, Helen, because that helps you throughout this journey because dementia is a different a different disease. It is so hard and it's so exhausting and it's so just everything. Yeah. So that's helpful for you. And then being able to parse out, sibling A behaves like this and sibling B behaves like that. It's helpful.
Well, talking about funeral arrangements, like we were talking about on your icebreaker question. Yeah. So my mom is very flip. She doesn't like to have deep conversations. She's been like that all her adult life. And she said, I just have a party. Just have a party when I die. And my siblings were like, oh, yeah, we can do that. And, of course, my response is, no, I'm not feeling that. Yeah. And, of course, in theory, right, this is what you can say now. Right. But I would tell somebody, this is the way you feel now. You may not feel like that when it happens. Right. Yeah. Everybody processes a death differently. Well, they do. And that's, and it's interesting. One of my uncles died and somebody had come to visit my mother and they said, well, what about you? Do you know what you want? And she said, Rosanne does. And I'm like, hold on. Hey, wait. I don't. We didn't. We haven't talked about it. So I actually pulled up my phone and I put in my notes and I said, what are you thinking, Mom? And we went through a few things. We didn't go through everything, but we went through a few things. And I know her and I knew her so well that I could fill in the blanks. And I pre-planned her funeral because I also knew that when she passed, even after all of these years of caring for her with dementia, I was not going to be in that space. Yeah. I was not going to be able to make a decision. I was going to be lucky if I was putting one foot in front of the other. And I didn't want to not have that prepared because I saw it as I was still caring for her. I was still on the job.
And that was still part of my job. And I wanted to make her send-off. I wanted to take care of her send-off as much as I took care of her living. I wanted to make sure that that worked also. And I planned it beforehand. It was horrible planning her funeral and then coming home and being like, hey, Mom, how you doing? I was just out. You know,
just out choosing your casket. You're
just
gonna look
out
awesome.
picking casket. Like, it's going to be great. Yeah. You know, but when the time came, it was, thank God it's all done.
Yeah. You saved yourself the work at a point where you weren't going to be able to make those decisions. And isn't dementia a weird disease like that? You have a lot of time. A lot of folks have a lot of time as the dementia draws out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're losing pieces of identity, pieces of personhood along the way from your loved one. Mm-hmm. Your identity changes as a caregiver. Yep. And yet, when you get to the death, it's still the same. You would think you'd sort of get credit for time served.
No.
It doesn't really work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. And, you know, it's part of that. It's part of that reason why you have to try to stay present with your person who's living with dementia, because there will still be those flashes of them. They're there, and they come to you. But if you're not present with that, and if you're so consumed with what they can't do anymore, you're going to miss what happens when they show up, because they will show up because they're still there. And I know it's that thing when people say, you know, well, they're not there anymore. It doesn't matter. She doesn't know if I'm there or not. Yeah, but you know what? Her heart knows that you're there. Her soul knows that you're there. Your energy, she knows your energy. And it's the same when you come into a room. You don't bring a bad mood in when you're going to visit somebody with dementia, because they can't change their mood. You're bringing your mood to them, and then you're leaving it with them. That's not fair. So you have to be aware of that. And again, it adds to more of the stress on the caregiver, and that's what makes dementia caregiving that much harder, because you're monitoring your own feelings, and it's important that you express your feelings. But when you're in the room with them, you have to be for them.
Right.
And that's, I mean, it's tough. It's tough.
It's that relational balance, right? When you were in relationship 50-50 before, and then as they withdraw and their ability to interact becomes less, it changes. And that burden of that relationship is on the caregiver.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Yeah. It's a unique experience, I think.
It is. And much to what you were saying, when it ends and when they are no longer with you, you don't know what just happened. It isn't time served, because it's like, well, now I really lost them. Now they're really not here. Yeah.
It's the full grief experience.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Yep.
This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
If you're looking for an easy solution to stay connected to your older loved ones, GrandPad is everything you need. It's the all-in-one tablet designed especially for seniors. With GrandPad, you get safe, simple video calling and photo sharing to connect the whole family. The GrandPad utilizes a simple format that allows seniors to enjoy games, music, email, and more. GrandPad comes with 4G LTE cellular service already included, so there's no need for Wi-Fi. Users can create a private family network that allows for secure photo and video sharing. At the core of the GrandPad team are the Grand Advisors, a group of seniors that continually inspire, test, and guide the development of GrandPad. The company has built a platform that empowers seniors of all ages and technological skills to safely connect with family, friends, and caregivers. No spam, no robocalls, only connections with those you trust. The GrandPad team strives to create a world where no senior is lonely or isolated. It's the smart choice to keep older adults connected. Visit our website today at grandpad.net/THOH or call 1-888-904-4723. GrandPad, keeping seniors connected.
So, as a caregiver for someone who had dementia, what would you say your style of advocacy was? Because a caregiver is very much an advocate.
Totally. my strategy with it was I wanted every doctor to remember that my mother wasn't just special to me. She was special.
Oh.
And there was more to her than her disease. There was more to her than that. She had a full life. She's this wonderful, vibrant, beautiful, inside and out person. And I always did that. I always would bring in a story or something and her pictures on the wall. And they would stop and say, "Oh, is that you?" Yeah, because she was in the newspaper when she was 80 and she was out dancing and, whatever. I wanted them to understand who she was because she was more than the words on that paper. And I didn't want them to just come in and breeze out. And I find that when you make it personal like that, it makes that connection. You need that connection. And I also never spoke in front of her. Like I didn't talk about her condition in front of her.
As if she were not there.
As if she was not there. I don't think that's fair. To stand there and say, well, now she's not eating and she's not doing that. No, it's not respectful. I was always concerned with her dignity, and I wanted her to feel that her dignity was intact. Of all the things, I knew what she was losing. I knew what her life was like. And I knew that her life went from everything that she did and everything that she experienced to one room. I was always aware of that. So when the doctors would come to the house, I would talk to them downstairs and I'd say, here's what's happening. I have my list. I go through my list, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And we go upstairs and they walk in and they see her and she's sitting in her chair and she's smiling and they come in and they talk to her. And when I would always sit, I would make her the point of the triangle. Okay. So she would be there, the doctor would be, and so that she could see me. And she could be comforted by the fact that she could see me and she would look at me and I'd nod my head yes, or I would just smile, just so that she felt confident. And when she was talking, and she knew that I would be supportive of her because that was our relationship. And she knew that I had her. And that's what I wanted her to feel. So that was what I always did when it came to that type of advocacy. And, I think it's important to meet whoever you're caring for where they are. Okay, great. I can't talk to her like I used to talk to her, but I can still talk to her about something.
Yeah.
I'm not, and again, there are those times when the mom gene kicks in. When you say, could you do me a favor? I just need, I'm doing whatever. I'm doing this thing. And, what do you think about that? Just to engage in that. Because they're still there. And it's important. It's important not to lose that realization.
I love that. You were such an advocate for your mom. So your advocacy superpowers, respect, inclusion, communication.
Yep.
I love it.
Empathy.
Very nice.
Yep.
So when you think about your caregiving experience with your mom,
yeah,
lasted a long time, and you were knee deep in it, neck deep in it.
Yep.
What would you go back and change about the care that you provided for your mom?
If I could have gotten her out of the house.
How so?
Just to get her out. Because she lived in one room. Now, let me just say, she was really happy living in that one room. She loved her routine. She loved the comfort of her things. Her things were familiar to her. Because that's the other thing with dementia, right? When you move out from what you're comfortable, everything it's just not good.
Right.
Right? It's almost like being disoriented and being off balance because you don't know where you're at. Nothing is familiar, all of that. So I made sure her room contained everything that she was comfortable with. And if something bugged her, I got rid of it and brought, something in. I would bring flowers in every week so that she could look at flowers every week, because it made her happy. So that I would, and she was very content all the way up until the pandemic hit. And then, nobody could come in. And I'm a lot of fun, Helen, but I'm not a lot of fun after like 6 months. It's just me.
Yeah. I think a lot of us could say that about ourselves. There were a lot of us that were not fun 6 months into the pandemic.
Right.
So her world became much, much smaller at that point.
With the pandemic, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we looking back now, we can see that with everybody. Everybody decompensated during the pandemic. I mean, it was a big decline for everybody. So I would go back with that. And I even thought about getting a chairlift and all, but it was still the same it was just different. It was warm in her room. It was cozy. So I have to let that go a little bit. And I probably wouldn't have listened to the doctor about Seroquel.
Really?
Yeah.
So I want to touch on that, not the medicine itself,
mm-hmm.
but the listening to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
We have in our culture, and I think some of this is generational. You and I think, are about the same age, so you can weigh in on this, what you think. So I'm not a boomer, but I'm 1 year removed from that. Right? I'm close.
Okay. I'm squarely Gen X.
Yeah. Okay. You're a little bit younger than I am. So I like with my mom's generation, the doctor would tell you something that they quote unquote recommended, and it was gospel in my mother's eyes.
Yes, indeed.
She still thinks that. She would say, she'll tell me, the doctor says I should do this, but complain about it. And I'm saying, well, Mom, you don't have to do that. It's really your choice. What? Yes, I do. The doctor said to. With my generation, at least I think, we are more geared to be informed and more self-actualized and more self-directing. And the doctor can offer up a suggestion, but no, we don't have to do that.
Right.
My mother doesn't compute that well. Her thing is, the doctor says, and I do. And my thing is, the doctor is the quarterback on the team. You're the coach.
Yep.
You decide.
Yep.
You decide. So, what's your take on that when it comes to the medicines and things like that?
I fully agree. You have the ultimate. You have the ultimate answer, and I always the question I always ask when it comes to medication is, what is your motivation? You're telling me this. What is your motivation for it? Is this something that's new that you want to try? Have you had good results with it? Is it the drug rep that just happened to come in before you left?
Right.
What's your motivation? And that helps me differentiate everything out. So that's how I go with it. We were in a position where my mother wasn't sleeping. So at about September, she stopped sleeping. So she would go 3 to 4 days straight, which meant I went 3 to 4 days straight.
Right. So let's make sure we emphasize the impact of that. Yeah, that's a brain that's agitated that gets no rest, and a caregiver that cannot rest either. That's a huge problem.
It was really bad, and I figured it out. It was tied to the moon. When it was a full moon, she was up. And I would, when I figured it out, I was like, oh no, it's this weekend, or oh no, it's Thursday to whatever. And
what you really said was, holy crap.
What I said was, holy crap.
Or worse, right.
Yeah, or probably worse. Yes, Helen. And it was awful because I fully, listen, having children, you experience that sleep deprivation. You experience when the child doesn't sleep, when your baby doesn't sleep, and you're up and you got to feed it, all of that. That was not this. And the difference is, a baby, you put in a crib, the baby can cry, you're not leaving, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
Not that I ever left my kids to cry, believe me, ever. That's why I didn't sleep when they were kids. But with a grown adult, you don't have that. You cannot have that as an option. So people will say, well, because you get especially with dementia, you get the old, well, just sleep when she sleeps. You can't. She's a fully formed adult. And what would happen is, I would put her to bed, I'd go in, I'd get in my bed, I'd fall asleep, and the sensor would go off, because I had a sensor mat in her room, so that when she stepped on it, the alarm went off in my room, not her room. And I would jump up and I'd go in and I'd be like, oh, hi. And she'd be like, oh, why are you awake? And I'm like, oh, nothing.
Because you're awake.
No reason, really.
Yeah.
So there was no. So then I got to the point where it was like sleeping for 10 minutes and getting woken up was not helping me. It was worse than being awake.
No.
But I fully found out why they use sleep deprivation as a torture device.
Yes.
Because it is horrible. And that she started in September with that, and then by November it was more where she would be up till 3 or 4 in the morning. And then she would fall asleep for a couple hours, and then she'd wake up, and then she'd fall asleep and sleep during the day. So then we were on that. But any way you slice it, I was not sleeping.
Yeah.
And there was a point in December I thought I was going to die. I really did. I thought this, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And it would be 5 o'clock. I'd be making dinner and thinking, well, I'm going to be up for another 12 hours or so. Like, and you get on that, you can't think, you can't do anything. Nothing makes sense. It's disorienting. It's disorienting. It was really, really awful. And I told her doctor about it. We tried the morazepine, which was supposed to be the double, increase appetite and help with sleep. It did neither for her. Nothing. Did nothing. And it was December. It was the end of December. And the doctor was like, I think you should try Seroquel. And I said, I don't want to try anything. This is a woman who never took anything. She didn't take any drugs. She took blood pressure medication. That was it. And I knew that about her. And I respected whatever she wanted to do. And I felt really, really, really awful about it. And he said, Rosanne, you have to do this because it's not good for her. It's certainly not good for you, but it's really, this is affecting her. And when because of this loop or whatever that's happening inside of her that's happening, we have to try to do something with that. And I did. And I said, okay. So we tried it. For me, I just feel bad about it because that's me. And I feel bad that I don't know if it did anything to her. I don't know if it caused anything to change in her, because then in March she had something. I don't know if she had a stroke. I don't know what happened, but she woke up and she couldn't speak. And of course, then I think, because as caregivers, we're in charge of everything, right? And then when something happens, we think it was our fault for whatever happened because we're in charge of everything. So how could it not be my fault?
Right. Right. She's not capable of making those decisions. I made it for her.
Right. So
did the Seroquel actually help with the sleep?
I think it helped. It was January then, and she was sleeping more, just not at night.
Mm-hmm. So, still with her schedule off. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes. I guess in the long run, yeah.
But did you feel, was the regret that you felt more geared to the fact that you felt you made a choice that was out of alignment with what your mother would have chosen for herself? Just to add another throw a med at it, did you feel like that was not really something in alignment with what your mom wanted?
It's a good question, Helen. I think, there's a part of me that says yes, and then there's the other part of me that has been with her, and when the doctor would say, this is what you have to do, she'd be like, okay.
She would just go along.
If that's what I need to do, then that's what I'll do. And then I would say, but I'm worried about, and she'll be like, and this is my mother. It'll all work out. And just let it go. As where she is in the, it'll all work out. I'm at the all the way other end of the scale going, but what about this, and then this, and then what if that happens, and then this, and this can happen.
Right.
So it's that thing. And again, I think it's part of the magical thinking in the after. Well, I could have prevented this. I could have done something.
Right. It's that review that you do of your caregiving job. It's your evaluation that you give yourself.
Right.
And nobody is a more harsh critic than a caregiver critiquing their own actions and experiences. We're so hard on ourselves that way.
We are. And when you think about the fact that we're making these decisions, and these are big decisions. This isn't, am I going to wear red shoes or blue shoes today? These are big decisions.
Life-altering. Absolutely.
Life-altering decisions, and we are under stress. We are sleep-deprived. We are eating or drinking too much or too little. We have we are completely off balance. And by the way, you need to make the decision that's going to affect your care partner's condition or life.
Yeah, the decision you're making is not about you.
It's not about you.
But no pressure. No pressure.
No pressure. Listen, don't make it feel, don't worry about it. Just it'll be good. Yeah. Yeah.
And there are 55 million unpaid family caregivers across the United States doing this type of work.
Yes. Yeah. Every day, showing up in spite of the fact they're sleep deprived and they're stressed and they're overwhelmed and they're caring for everybody. And if they have kids while they're caring, they feel like they're losing out on their lives and their own lives, and it's never enough, and you're never doing enough for anybody in your life.
Yeah, and they're working a full-time job.
Or they had to quit that full-time job because they couldn't be up all night and still go into work.
Right, and they're depleting their finances.
And they're not paying into their Social Security. All of that. It's all of it. Yeah.
It's the world's crappiest job description.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And yet we're not looked at as the essential workers we are. We're just looked at like, you're just there.
Yeah.
We're not included in the medical reports. We're not included in the discussions. Nothing.
One of the things I always advise is when a person is a caregiver, it is so important, first of all, to keep up your own healthcare needs, right? To keep up with your appointments and don't skip them. But when they ask you what your work is, what do you do with your time, absolutely tell them, I am a family caregiver.
Yes, indeed.
And if your healthcare provider does not bite onto that and talk about how you are able to take care of yourself, if you are able to take care of yourself, they are doing you a disservice. That is not great care. They should be very interested in your job, your occupation. So if you said, I am a welder.
I was going to say a welder.
Yeah,
I can't believe you said it.
They would talk to you about the hazards on the job and your knees and your back and safety and body mechanics and any sort of environmental exposure that you would have had and your vision, all these things.
Yep. Are you wearing your safety goggles?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. What safety measures do you take? How many hours are you working a week? They would ask you all these questions related to your occupation. A family caregiver should be no different. No different.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree with you. Fully agree. But you know what happens instead? When I finally made it into my cardiologist, he told me about his mother. Oh yeah, I know. My mother's 96 and he was going on and on, and I'm sitting.
Your doctor was sitting. Wow.
Sitting on the exam table like, oh yeah. I said, I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And in my head, I'd be thinking, and I don't really care because that's not my role right now.
Well, it's like, dude, I got out of the house. I have 2 hours to get to this appointment and go to the grocery store and get back home. Can we kind of...
Yeah. Can we focus on the task at hand?
Focus here? Yeah.
Yeah. Something good for every healthcare provider to remember.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me, if you were sitting with a caregiver who's at the start of this journey with someone with a brand new dementia diagnosis, what wisdom would you share with them?
I would tell them to become as educated as you could in dementia. And I'm not just talking about what you're seeing on social media.
Oh, yes.
Now, social media is great. You get information and all that, but it's not the gospel. It's not everything. It's not real sometimes. And I don't not to be disparaging, but you need the education. You have to be educated so that you know what's happening. It's like, social media was not what it was when I started in all of this, right? It wasn't the same. I used to go on message boards and see what was happening with other caregivers.
Right. Chat groups, chat formats.
Absolutely. And I'd put a question in the search, and then I'd read what happened, because these were real people and I wanted to get that information. But I also wanted to get the medical information. I would read medical journals, and I'd watch nursing videos. Like, I taught myself how to take a blood pressure with a stethoscope and the cuff. How to listen to lungs, the best way to lift and move, and all of that practical stuff that helps you along the way. But I also wanted to learn the medical terminology, because it's different when you have a conversation with a medical professional and you use their words. They go, "Oh, this one knows what she's talking about."
Right. And they're going to give you more of what you need.
They are, absolutely, because they don't have to try to parse out. You don't need all of the medical terms, but you need a few just so that it makes their antenna go off. Now, there's a two sides of this, right? What happens with that then is, and if I had a nickel for every medical professional who said to me, "Are you a nurse?" I'm not. I play one on TV. I say, but, I'm not a nurse. But what happens with that then is you also get you'll figure it out.
Oh my word.
So I got that more times than I would care to explain, Helen.
You'll figure it out.
What I actually got would be, "Oh, Rosanne, I have no doubt you'll figure this out."
I don't have words for that.
Yeah.
I think that's just a lazy way of saying you're on your own.
You're on your own. And that's what I heard. You are on your own, honey. Good luck to you. And, okay. But in knowing and in learning about dementia, I kind of had an idea of what I was looking at. Now, some people don't want to know, Helen. Some people don't want to read it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to understand it. And I get that. I fully get that. That's not who I am. I want to know, so that when we turn a corner, I want to know that we've turned a corner, and then what's down that path. So I just think education can't hurt you. And I always say information is power.
Oh, yeah.
What you do with it is up to you, but information is power with that. And you have to know this, and you have to be that expert, because you know your care partner. So what you're reading and what you're seeing, and then your knowledge of your care partner, when you put them together, that's power. And you also have to you have to be okay with being the squeaky wheel. You have to be okay with calling and saying, "Yeah, I did this yesterday. Hi, it's me again. It didn't work. So now, do you have any other suggestions?" And you do it in that way of, "I need your help." Not the squeaky wheel of, "Okay, you know what? You didn't help me." The squeaky wheel of, "Hi, hello, not working. What more can we do? I will wait for a call," or whatever. So that would be my advice. And my other advice is, it's a hard thing in all of this with dementia caregiving, is that you matter. You matter just as much as the person you're caring for. You are just as important in this relationship as they are. And, you need your own support. And if you're fortunate to have people in your life, that's great. And even if you are, you still need outside support, because those people, you're going to burn them out. But support for yourself is paramount. And, I never, I'm Italian. I don't do support groups, right, Helen? I mean, come on, we eat, right? We eat.
I'm from the South. We do the same thing.
I'm going to have some cake. I'm going to make a cake. I'm going to buy Oreos, whatever. I'm going to eat, or I'm not going to eat, but I probably am going to eat. It was not a thing for me to be, I'm going to go to a support group and talk about my feelings. Like, no, that's not my jam. And again, Italian, you don't bring anything outside the house, right? You're in the house. But my life changed when I found Daughterhood, actually, of being able to talk to other people and being able to be in the room with other caregivers and be like, wow, wait a minute, we all feel like this? This is what's, and you can't, there are things that you can say to a caregiver that you can't say to an outside caregiver. And because of the platitudes that you get, well, you should, you're lucky that you can do this. Yeah, I know that I'm lucky I can do this. I know. Yeah, like that kind of things. I adored my mother. I absolutely adored her. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. But it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and it almost killed me.
Yeah, people don't choose to do this.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I even if you do choose, and there was never a doubt. We would go see one of my aunts, and we would get to the car, and my mother would look at me and say, just put me someplace. I won't know any different.
Yeah, keep me safe.
And I'd say to her, Ma, don't worry about it. I got you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And so I always knew that room was going to be for my mother. I did. I knew it. And I was okay with that because I wanted to care for her. She was my girl. I was going to care for her. But it was still the hardest thing I ever did. And that's the part that people forget. Like, yeah, we're doing this and we're putting all of this energy and all of our love and we're putting everything out. But it's still hard. And you're allowed to say that it's hard. But you have to say it to the right people. Because if you say it to the people that don't understand it, you're only going to feel worse about yourself.
Yeah.
Because the resentment and the exhaustion and the overwhelm and the isolation, all of that eats at you. And you have to find a way to get that out of you. Whether you dance it out or you yell it out or you scream in your car. You have to get that out of you. And it's okay. That's the thing. It's okay.
You are doing some fantastic work at Daughterhood to connect to these caregivers that are doing the same work. Tell my listeners how they can find you, find your podcast, and how they can connect with you.
Oh, they can find everything at daughterhood.org. Our circles are there. Our full calendar of support circles are there. The podcast lives there. Anne's founder, Ann Tumlinson's blogs are there. She writes beautifully about being a caregiver and the challenges and how you can try to help yourself. You can also find me on Spotify, Apple, anywhere, as we like to say, anywhere you stream your podcasts. And all across social media, Daughterhood the Podcast and Daughterhood. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. And I'm more than happy. Somebody, you want to send me a message on any of those platforms, I will totally respond.
Well, as a daughter of a mom who is aging and aging with dementia, thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for being on the show today. It's just wonderful to have you with me.
Thank you, Helen. Anytime. Listen, you're doing a great job. In case nobody told you today, you're doing a great job. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.